cannot be right, it cannot be legal, but I don't know if it's illegal.
Well, you can either take more money in or pay less out.
This gives me hope.
Well, this could be bad. I work for the insurance company. If we could prevent contractors and roofers from going door to door, we could prevent whatever claims disbursements from that sector.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're at Chad Wilson Law Firm. Thank you so much for doing this interview. So my first question is, I want to start with your story, with the story of the law firm. You specialize in insurance work per se, like you come on after insurance companies for not paying their claims. How long have you been doing it, and what's the story of your law firm? Like
any great Hollywood story, we have to go back a lot further than just the firm, but where I came from, which was Southeast Texas, and I went to a pretty small school in Port Neches, and decided early on that I didn't want to work behind a desk upon graduation from college. I was big into sailing and competitions in sailing, and I decided to go to the United States Merchant Marine Academy with an undergrad in marine engineering and marine transportation. When I graduated, I went and worked for Noble Drilling for a while. I did engineering work, operations management, and I ended up in contracts and sales. Basically, where all the chess pieces were of all the rigs and where Noble was putting them in the world and what contracts they were putting in place to work for Exxon, Chevron, all the different major players. And at the time, Noble didn't have a legal department at all. That was the relationship. We're agreeing to whatever those terms were, and it was done by a handshake. Fast forward a few years, I'd always planned to go to law school, but I didn't want to do it readily out of the academy, and I wanted to finish up my Navy Reserve commitment, which I did complete in 2005. I went to Exxon after that and basically was charged with all the tendering and contracting for offshore development of Nigeria. It was about $4.5 billion worth of contracts. And then upon that contract, I wasn't really sure if I wanted that to renew. So I came back here, I took the bar exam because I had already completed the law school program, set up my own shop. So at first,
What year was that?
That was I got the bar card in November of 2011. And shortly thereafter, I hung up my own shingle, and it was a law firm of one, me. Worked out of the house for a few months, and then I ended up setting up the first office, and in walks some sailors that I knew from previous years, and they had a public adjusting firm, and they walked in out of the blue and said, "Hey, Chad, do you think you might be able to help us on some of these first party claims?" I said, "I don't see why not. An insurance policy is nothing more than a different type, a specific type of contract, so I'll take a look at it." And that's what got the ball rolling probably in 2012, and I did a couple of those and did a pretty good job, and then got more and more and more. Basically, the ball got rolling just by doing a good job off the first dozen or so that I completed.
The public adjusters start feeding you these claims. What kind of claims were they? Was insurance denying them? Like, tell me about your first year, first experience.
As with most, I'd say 25 to 30% are complete denials, and the rest being short pay or payment under the deductible, which is kind of a misnomer because there is no payment when they estimate damages less than the deductible. Those were the majority. And what I thought was interesting with this type of work, especially coming from an engineering background, is how lame the excuses that the insurance companies would come up with. And I'd go into different settlement talks or at mediations, and I was always waiting for the punchline. Like, this has to be a joke. There's no way, based on the pictures and the evidence that we have, that y'all are going to sit here and stand behind the reasons that y'all have either non-paid it or denied it outright. There's no way. It's like, here's the line in the sand. There's no way they're going to stay on that line. And to this day, they do. No matter how absurd what they come up with, they always stay on the other side of the line.
Funny you said it, because we did a video at Roofing Insights. We asked contractors top 10, top 100 denials, and they all named them. And we did a chart, and I did a YouTube video. Top 10 insurance denials. We're not paying for that, or my company never paid for that, or all the absurd stuff. And I see comments under that video, like contractors like, yep, nailed it. It's exactly what we're dealing with. So today, fast forward 8-9 years, you're doing how many claims a year? 300-400?
Probably more than that. The firm's probably processed through some sort of disposition of settlement or verdict over 4,000. We currently have over 900 that are in process. Either they've just been signed up, or they've been settled and we're waiting on closeout of funding.
This is a huge number, absolutely crazy number. If you look at the amount of public adjusters we have in the industry, everyone is growing. Like this third party, like used to be insurance companies and contractors and the homeowners were trying to help settle whatever. Now you have an army, growing army of third parties. You have PAs, you have engineers, you have lawyers, and I don't feel like we're still even close to level the playing field.
Oh, not even close. So we've got 9 attorneys now, plus a staff that supports all of them. So the firm currently has over 30 W-2 employees. We just moved into some more space down on the first level of my building, just waiting for that expansion. As this third party that you're speaking of, no, we're not making a dent.
Do you see insurance companies changing in the last few years, how they do business?
Have I seen them change? Yes, they've gotten worse. So the most difficult clients that I have, I say difficult, that's probably not the right word, but our baby boomers, the greatest generation, our elders. They don't want to sue anyone. And the greatest conflict there is, I've had clients who came back from world wars. They married, their high school sweetheart. They bought a house or built a house with their bare hands, and they started insuring it with State Farm, for instance. And they've had them the entire time. Maybe had one claim during that time, and in the last 15 years, the industry's changed. It's totally changed to where all of a sudden, hey, they've paid premiums for the last 50, 60 years, and they don't understand why they're getting these letters. The hail hit, it was bad. It's apparent to everyone except for the insurance company that the home is damaged. I don't understand why they're not paying my claim. We've only utilized them one other time before. It's like, that's because it's their money. It's the insurance company's money, and they don't want to give it to you. It's not the same relationship that insureds and insurers had 20 years ago, 25 years ago. The storm would come, the tree would fall through the house, the insured would call their agent and say, hey, we got some damage, and then all of a sudden there'd be people out removing the tree, cars go away, they get fixed, roofers come in, the house gets patched up, new roof, and everybody just went on with their lives.
What really changed? Is it they changed their business model? Because we have publicity, we have YouTube videos, TV, like those stories, they do air a lot. Like nightmare stories every once in a while air. So you have a lot of bad publicity when you don't pay claims, when you don't do what you're supposed to. Why insurance companies stop paying when they know, it's the right thing to do and it's going to hurt?
It's a pretty easy answer. Money.
But 20 years ago, they still were in the business for money as well.
Right. And
More
they got new
profits.
customers by referrals. So let's go back to the 15 and 1600s when insurance began. It began in the merchant marine, and merchants sending their goods overseas pretty far. And back in the day, that was just on your wooden ships, and there was a lot of risk. They would load the ships up as much as they possibly could, which is fine in fair weather, but when the weather turns bad, the extra stability that they gave up to put more goods on it now turns that into a bad situation for the mariners. So what they ended up doing is tossing some of the goods overboard to save the rest. So what happened is the merchants started getting together to insure each other. Hey, if my goods are on top and they get tossed to save everybody else, well, everybody else would chip in to recoup them for that loss. Well, now it's not all the insureds betting against or for each other. It's held by a third party. All your major insurance companies, they were created to make profit. Period. And it's an entity. It's not an individual. It doesn't have feelings. They say, hey, we're not making enough. Hire somebody to come in and say, can you look at our business model and you give us some advice as to how we can make more money? Well, you can either take more money in or pay less out. In this case, I think what we're seeing today and what we've seen for the last 10 years is both. My kids are 13, 10, and 7. And if we watch a particular program for too long and the same repetitive insurance commercials will come on, they'll start singing the jingle or whatever it is, or talk about how charismatic Jake from State Farm is. It works. Go out, sell it, spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year, be in everybody's homes, on their devices. It's wherever you look. Well, now they're gaining money, and then the other thing to do is just not pay claims.
What's happening right now in Louisiana when State Farm pretty much says, hey, we're not going to pay for evacuation, and governor, I think, says, no, you will. Because would you say it's overregulated or underregulated?
There was another one that State Farm just got dinged for up in Illinois, and I think the fine was $250 million. You call it State Farm, any of these big companies. That sounds like a large amount of money, but if they made $1 billion off of whatever law that they broke, and they're only fined a fraction of that, the corporation continues, probably without even skipping a beat. Even though it's a lot of money, sure. If they're making a hell of a lot more money than whatever based on that act, then they're just going to keep doing the act. That's what we fight every day. I mean, in Texas, the insurance code here is very protective of consumers, as it is with most states. However, it certainly doesn't prevent the behavior from happening.
Can we dive in a little bit in the State Farm situation? Because I actually recently visited Illinois, Chicago, and I've never met so many frustrating contractors who literally want to get out of business because every State Farm case they have gets denied, and they're hitting this wall where they don't know what to do, public adjuster, appraisals, all the options, legal, but there's a few pockets in the country when it's extremely bad. I hear about it in Texas, I hear about it in Illinois, and I know you took State Farm to court and you won. What is it, 3 or 4 cases now? How do you beat State Farm in court?
Something like that. A lot of those companies' decisions aren't made based on the facts of those claims. Now, if there was a standstill on payment of claims in Illinois, I have a feeling it's probably because the execs had a feeling they were about to get hit with a $250 million fine. Well, where's that going to come from? And there's only so much that we can learn from the back of the shareholders' pamphlets and the 10Ks and 8Ks that we're privy to. But just like with Allstate, that they'll tell us and my attorneys that they don't think a particular claim's worth anything. The case is worth this, blah blah blah. But all of a sudden, they've got leftover money in the till come the end of the year, and all of a sudden they have money to pay these cases that they said they would never pay for. Back to your question, which was how do you go after State Farm? I can certainly empathize with the roofers and the contractors. I know they're frustrated because they're up there every day and they see the damage, and then they don't understand why State Farm is telling them, "Oh, what do you mean it's denied? Look at this. You got to be crazy." Well, they are crazy because here's the damage. Like anything, I would recommend they try to diversify their portfolio. Hopefully, you don't have a oligopoly of State Farm insuring in a particular area where the storm hits. It's not 60% State Farm. That would be a very frustrating
What if
situation.
It is? Like, unfortunately, in many areas it is. Like Chicago, for example, it's State Farm and Allstate. They're market leaders, so you will have the most of the cases.
All right. The recommendation is treat the non-State Farm clients as you would, knowing that you'd probably get paid in the shorter term. Go through the claim process depending on what rules are allowed in that state. Because in Texas, a contractor or a roofer can't act as a public adjuster. So there's certain things they can do, certain things they can't do. But whenever I talk to those guys, I'm like, just write it down. Write everything down. It's great to be pissed off and throw hammers and stuff like that when something that makes no sense happens, but that doesn't really get you anywhere. Write down who shows up at the house. Write down what you've seen, the dates, the times, the comments that they make. I mean, it makes a world of difference if they write down what the adjuster is telling them while they're out there, because it's fresh in their memory, and when it's written down, attorneys can use it later against that company. So basically, build the case, help your clients out, and just know that it might take more time to get the State Farm claims paid. Now, the way that I look at it down in Texas is like, I have the same wall to deal with. However, I'm looking at it from a different vantage point, because all those issues and those frustrations migrate their way to me. All right, well, now how am I going to deal with it? Well, they put up a wall against me too, but at some point, the wall's going to be breached, and I'm going to bulldoze it as hard as I can and let the dam flow thereafter. And sometimes it can happen at mediation, but they're really stingy. So we take it to trial. Fine. Let's go head to head. Put all your cards down, and we'll do the same. And I will beat you every time.
Can you share a story of one of those wins? Like, pick any.
Well, the last two, the last one was in Tarrant County, which many on the legal field say, well, that's a tough area.
What's so tough about it?
Well, quoting the judge in recess, as well as other plaintiff's attorney, it's predominant. Well, this is in Fort Worth, and it's a conservative area by nature. That is, there's a lot of conservatives that live there. Now, I look at first-party cases much differently than a personal injury attorney would look at venues, because it's very different than a car wreck or a slip and fall in a supermarket or anything else where there's a lot of gray area as far as the injury is concerned and how much past and future damages are worth. I like the venue because I have a lot of conservatives. It's and I have a lot of property owners, and all but one, I'd say, in that case, which was last month, we had 40 individuals to choose from to pick a jury. Of that 40, 36 or 7 owned their own homes, which is a pretty big percentage as far as from the jury pool is concerned. And all but one had insurance on those homes.
Oh, wow.
And I did talk to the one lady who didn't have insurance to ask why, and basically they had just inherited it. And it wasn't insured by her late mom, but they were planning on getting insurance. So they understand the frustration and where the insurance industry has gotten in the last 10, 15 years. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but having property owners on the jury is great. Now, the judge shared while the jury was out deliberating that 60% of jury trials pour the plaintiff out, at least what she's personally seen in her court. Now, getting poured out is basically they come back with a 0. You don't get anything. Now, Amanda and I put on a great case, and I felt very confident with the jury, but they came back with a unanimous verdict for us, which is even better, because it's like now there's no doubt. Not only did they give us a yes to liability on the contract, a yes to whether State Farm acted in bad faith, they also gave us a yes to they acted in bad faith and violated the Texas Insurance Code knowingly. Plus they gave us damages for all of those and some common law questions that were in there as well. And then if you put a unanimous verdict on top of that, I mean, that sends a message. That's the bulldozer breaking through that wall. And when I can get movement in one area, it has a tendency to pull in everything else.
So both cases one case you mentioned took you about 2 years from mediation to actually trial. So what was happening with the house and contractor? Everybody just waiting?
Yes, basically there was nothing that the contractors could do. My client in Dallas was great. She was a older widow, and I do see certain patterns with insurance companies. So with an elderly woman who's in the insurance carrier's eyes very unlikely to get up on the roof, well, they just tell them whatever they want. Wow. Plus, people in general are very trusting. And this is something that I tell juries when I'm in trial. Who you select as an insurance company, that decision reflects back to you, really. Well, State Farm has to be good because, well, I'm insured by State Farm, and if they're not any good, well, that reflects back on me and whatever poor decision making that I have. But you don't know that because it's something that's going to happen at a later time in the future. So you don't know if they're going to handle your claim the way they're supposed to or not. So everyone, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, of course they're going to be there when when I need them, even if they're not there for our neighbors. Well, I noticed that with older houses where there's clear damage, but it might just be an older house, they get denied or underpaid. On that one, they came up with zeros across the board. My client complained. He got the impression, this is back to the one in Fort Worth, that right from the get-go, State Farm wasn't going to pay it. This adjuster that showed up was giving every excuse for the damage that the insured was pointing out. It's like, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. He demanded a reinspection. They came back out and they threw, a couple more things in. They recognized that there was wind and hail damage, but they only put a couple $100 down at the beginning. Back over to Dallas, my client, even though she was an elderly, well, if she ever sees this, she probably wouldn't appreciate the elderly, but we'll just say she's got some white hair, but she's very strong, and she actually would get up on her roof from time to time, a couple times a year, and she would blow all the leaves off with a leaf blower. Wow. So she was very aware of the state of her roof. And supposedly her State Farm adjuster, who was your third-party captive independent adjuster, he'd been in the business for 17 years, I think. And what really stinks about that situation is he had, her friend's contractor had come over and said, hey, all the rest of these roofs are being replaced on our street. What have you done? Well, she called the agent, and the agent said, well, you need to get us a bid before we even send somebody out. She goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. I want my insurance company to come take a look and see if it's damaged. So that actually took a couple of months before they even got out there, because, and I've seen this with many of the insurance companies where they try to shift it to the insured. No, you need to get us a bid or an estimate.
As a lawyer, what's your recommendation? Would you recommend homeowner to have a contractor inspect and be present during insurance adjuster inspection, or would you recommend insurance sending their adjuster?
It's the insurance company's responsibility to get out there promptly after they're given notice.
I see.
Whether the homeowner or homeowner's contractor is out there, it doesn't matter. The insurance company's job is to go out and perform a reasonable inspection. Now, that's the key term in Texas. Now, it can be reasonable for many reasons. It can be unreasonable. So if you get a guy who's got 17 years of experience, and this particular storm at the Dallas house, it had 2.5, 3-inch hail. Wow. On a asphalt shingle roof. I want to say the roof was about 12 or 13 years old. Yeah, there were huge hail hits all over. The neighbor's contractor actually came over for that particular inspection, and based on what this tenured independent adjuster was telling this guy, he got so pissed off, he just left like 20 minutes before the inspection was over. That's how well that inspection went. Then the adjuster came off the roof and informed my client, hey, it looks like the flat portion over the patio is covered, which was a modified bitumen, but that was it. And she's like, that doesn't even make sense, because it's the same damage on the flat part as it was for the shingle part to her, and she's a layman. She's like, that can't make any sense. So she too complained to her insurance company. They sent somebody else out, but in all of my experience, I've never seen the insurance company come back and actually do anything more than they had done before. they basically send someone to try to talk the insured into believing what the previous adjuster said.
What's the rule? How many times is there such a rule as 2 or 3 inspections? Like if you don't agree with the first adjuster, can you request legally from the insurance company to send a second adjuster?
Well, contractually you can. Legally, sure, it's not illegal to say,
Sure.
hey, I don't believe.
But it's in a
what
contract with the State Farm to request second inspection, get a second opinion?
Sure.
In Minnesota, as a contractor, I've done it many times. And I've had jobs where second one comes in different mood, like completely different outcome. Like first one is denied, don't see the damage. Second one comes out, writes check on the spot. Like I've seen that. And I always told my homeowners, like, call insurance company again, and they'll send second or third. And sometimes second one will open a claim where the first one is completely out.
I'm sure that happens.
Sure.
But those aren't the ones that I get because they're paid.
And I love hearing how lawyer explains it, because we're frustrated, but we don't have options. Like, I like how the story goes. What happened next?
They sent somebody else out. I think they threw a couple of $100 extra on it, but pretty much confirmed the findings of the previous adjuster. And then she said, well, this is horse crap, and she called us. One thing that we do at the firm is we confirm the damage. The insurance companies in Texas lobbied, and after 2017, there's some different notifications and details that have to be in the notification prior to suit. And the insurance companies obviously asked for the world, but one thing that they got was we have to be a little bit more or closer in our approach to actual damages in Texas. And I can understand why they were asking for this, talking to defense attorneys, where the pre-suit notice might be, you screw this claim up, we want $1 million right now for a 30 square in this area. And that's about all the information that they got. It's like, that's not really helpful. Plus, it didn't separate any of those numbers. It's like, we need a better or more precise number. And part of that change in law is, look, in your pre-suit notice, you have to be pretty close to what the actual damages are when you provide a dollar amount that you're demanding. If I get that wrong as an attorney, well, if I prove up less in a jury verdict somehow, then I get penalized. But it's actually my client who gets penalized, because they take whatever that fraction is that I'm off from the pre-suit demand and the verdict, and they take that multiplier against the attorney's fees. So that was their way of trying to get more accurate numbers. Now, I think that's just a black and white example of them not performing reasonable inspections in the first place, where the first wave of adjusters that go out after a storm for the insurance companies either throw numbers down that are way under the deductible, or they outright deny them. And then they deal with squeaky wheels after that.
So what happened next with this case? So it took you about 2 years. So do you have to find a contractor to do the estimate, how much the claim should be? You know, if they say it's $1,000, so what do you say? You say, no, it's at $25,000 based on Exactimate, or how do you estimate the damage?
We come out, and if there wasn't a PA involved, or we already had an estimate, we'd send one out and figure out what those numbers are. I think all of our estimates are done through Exactimate. On that particular one, I think the damages were $17,500 in Dallas, and we'd send out the pre-suit notice. I don't know how many hundreds of pre-suit notices that I've sent out since that law changed, but I could count the number that were paid within the 60-day period after that on one or two fingers. After that, we wait the statutory 60 days and then we file suit thereafter. And then we start discovery. On those particular two cases, they started before COVID. COVID really messed up the inspection process during litigation. So my engineer actually did a desk review before he got a chance to do a physical inspection. So, I mean, they had a 3.5-year wait between when they were denied and when the different citizens that sat on the jury said, no, y'all are going to pay this, and you're going to pay a penalty for what you did.
How much did it cost the insurance company at the end?
The one in Dallas, the jury gave us a verdict that was for the actual damages that we had requested, somewhere in the $17,500. Then, under violations of the insurance code, the jury basically doubled that number and put a number between $38,000, $39,000 in for that. In federal court, we were in the district court for the Northern District of Texas. It works a little bit different than in state court, where I go to the court after a positive jury verdict and request attorney's fees. And because State Farm jacked around so much on that particular case, we had a lot of hours into it. And I want to say at the end of the day, that one that had $17,500 in actual damages, the request was probably all in around $290, $280.
Do you think they're learning their lesson, or do you think it's still not going to make a difference and they're going to keep doing what they're doing because from the top it's still...
I don't know, Dimitri, that might be a trick question. What do I think they think? I'm not sure. What are they doing?
Do you see them changing after those couple of cases won?
Yeah, because in the Fort Worth verdict, I mean, that was close. It was under 200, but another 75 for attorney's fees. So, I mean, the multiplier of what they should have paid at the beginning and what they're ultimately going to have to pay, yeah, it does. I have to think that it makes them pay attention. Now, what I think they think, I don't know. But I know that I've had a lot more settlement offers come from them in the weeks afterwards. And I would think that that's not only for my client's benefit, but for most of the insureds that are in similar situations, not necessarily represented by my firm.
How do you pick your claims? Who do you work with? Like, what kind of initial claim review do you have? And how does someone work for you, with you from the moment you receive a call, say, hey, I have a job? Like, what's the process? Guide me through.
The majority of those who come to me come through word of mouth. Now, with the public adjusters, this isn't, as you mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of people who do it. It's a pretty niche community, and they all talk. At some point, they all talk. Or if they're frustrated with how it's going for them and they try certain things, I can't speak to what other firms do a lot because I'm busy doing my own thing. And I know that we get clients from a lot of different referral sources, and I don't have much of any turnover from those sources. And I can only imagine that's because we do a good job and they're happy with the outcomes of those cases. And that also comes down to money. At the end of the day, is there enough money for the property owner to fix everything that was damaged by the storm, the fire, the flood, what have you, plus pay all the expenses of the case and pay my fees?
What kind of case are you trying not to take?
The ones where the photos don't give that particular claim justice.
Like hail damage, just not enough, or bare minimum, or not graphic enough?
Yeah,
What do you mean
it's
by
tough to take photos of hail damage that's not there, or hey, I don't know how you guys have identified hail damage, but that's not hail damage. I don't know if y'all are trying to test me or what, but in every industry there's good ones and bad ones, and sometimes I'd say the lesser contractors will try to get me involved in cases, and I'll take a look at it and be like, no, I'm not doing that. You can take that type of business somewhere else. We don't have time for it.
On your website, you have a case with a pipe bursts, I think. So, do you deal a lot with those?
I know you guys live up north. This is Texas. We are not equipped.
But you had that 1 year, like, where you have a lot.
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. Even when I wasn't an attorney, I was working in the corporate world. When Houston would get a bad ice storm, the citizens would still, and you probably noticed from the airport, they also drive 80, 90 miles an hour. Even after a storm hits at night and lays a nice 1/4 inch thick glaze of ice on everything, they will get up and try to drive 80 or 90 miles an hour in the morning. The news stations are really good about it. They put cameras on the backside of overpasses, and then you watch the sun come up, and you just watch the car spin. I'd stay at home and drink coffee. Now, what happened to Texas months ago was really, really bad. Not just 12 hours of some ice that quickly thaws away. It was day after day after day after day of sub-freezing temperatures, and the properties down here just aren't built for that when the electricity isn't on. There's no heat.
How did insurance companies respond to massive influx of claims?
A lot of them denied them.
Still deny them,
yeah.
Even when it was that obvious?
It was. Now, this is another one where we had to take extra steps on the intake process to ensure that the policy actually covered it. Now, a lot of those arguments is, hey, you've got two different areas in the policy. They're trying to say, well, no, this is an accidental discharge. Well, then why would you have this cause in two different places in your policy? Here's accidental discharge for plumbing, but you also have coverage for freezing and everything that spawns from that. So
how do you fight them? Do you hire engineers? How do you prove that more work needs to be done? Because now we're arguing scope of work.
I do go after them with adjusters and engineers, some of which are equipped with your probes. Hopefully at that point, the damage has been pulled out before they get any mold. Plus, in that particular instance of the freeze, it wasn't too much of a problem because it would stay cold for so long. A lot of the post-hurricane cases, we get mold problems. If electricity hadn't been turned back on, there aren't enough contractors to come in and help mitigate. But that's a separate issue. On most of these, it's basically going in and getting a solid scope of work as compared to what the adjusters come up with. And just like with Louisiana and the hurricanes that they've had, the number of freeze claims that came in was pretty incredible. There wasn't a city that wasn't affected somehow. And as we know, the insurance companies aren't set up to take care of a crisis that large in a reasonable amount of time. So they bring in their third-party contractors, and that, they say that they're independent, but They're not. And there's homeowners that are out there watching this. They really need to know, hey, when these guys come in that are sent from the insurance companies and say, hey, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm independent. They've asked me to come and take a look. That's their code verbiage for, I work for the insurance company. So even though I'm here to document your damage and you think I'm here to help you, you should also be very mindful and watch what I'm doing.
Where's your help coming from? I know it's regulated here in Texas, for example. You still have commissioners. You still, like, where's the government? Where's the help? Where, when you have a massive disaster like 2 weeks of snow in Texas, you would think that government would step in and make insurance companies accountable. Are they making them accountable, and can they make them accountable?
Can they? Yes. In this particular situation, I don't think that's gonna happen, because there's too many entities to point fingers at. There's no sole blame. The insurance companies be like, well, hey, we've never. You can almost compare this to the one bite rule with a dog. You might not know if a dog is dangerous until the first time it bites, but after that, you know. Well, an event like this has never happened in Texas to that scale. So the insurance companies do have it out there to say, well, we didn't have the Army ready to go in that area at the time because it's never happened before. This is a first to us, but then, you go and there's other entities to blame. I don't know how many power generation plants were online at the time, but there certainly weren't enough getting online knowing that this was coming. And the board that was charged with ensuring the grid, certainly they all failed to do their job wholeheartedly. I think at least 2 or 3 sent in their resignations right after that, because that's what real leaders do. You screw up a very cush position where you get paid 6 digits or more, and after it's known that you completely failed, then you just quit.
Who do you use for insurance for your house?
That's a great question. It's currently UPC.
Is it the best insurance?
Well, I haven't had to use them, so I don't know. But since it was the decision that I made, of course they're going to be there for me when I need them. I would expect them to act like most. Now, UPC, and I get this question a lot, especially with clients that I've helped, and now they've got money to fix their property. Well, should I get rid of the insurance company that I've been with? Well, probably. Who should I go with? And my recommendation my answer to that question is, don't go with anyone that does national commercials.
That's great advice.
The reason is because those are the same companies that keep me really busy. The no-namers, or at least the ones that don't do that much advertising, you don't hear about that much, they don't keep me very busy at all. UPC, I used to not get any work from. However, I don't think they didn't get through the COVID crisis very well. I think whenever they sent their personnel home, there was a lot of delays in communication in their claims handling, and I saw a spike in claims that were headed my direction that had UPC on it, and that was usually the underlying cause, was just a complete disconnect with the home base as far as whether they were going to pay claims or not.
Can you set up some expectations for someone who may be considering suing the giant? So what does it take to sue someone like State Farm? I mean, a leader in the industry. Expectations, what do you have to know? Like, what kind of defense they have. Like, what are we going against? Is it a true giant who will try to fight back, or are they just going to drag time and still settle at the end?
Well,
How fierce the fight is.
back to the line in the sand, when we were having that conversation with our client, it's like, you are where you are. They're pretty much in their worst case when they get to me. I can pretty much only make their situation better. However, if you don't do anything, it's going to, your current situation is going to be your status quo for, well, basically forever. Because if the insurance company hasn't paid it by this point, they're not going to until somebody forces them to. So usually at that point, there's documentation that you have a claim and there is damage. Now they've denied it or underpaid it, however you want to call it, but Allstate is about coming back later and sending that notice of non-renewal toward the end of the policy 60 days before, saying, hey, you haven't fixed your property, or you haven't sent us evidence that you've fixed your property, so we're going to non-renew you this time around. Now, they'll say it's for whatever the non-covered reasons are. Where
I'm going to pause you there. How legal that is? Because I've seen most contractors knows that scenario. We tell homeowner to call insurance company, to call them, to deny the claim, and then within 60 days they get that letter that they drop in them after being with the company for 30 years. What homeowner can do in that instance, and is it normal? It cannot be right, it cannot be legal, but I don't know if it's illegal, because I don't know the law.
It's morally terrible. Mm-hmm. Can they do it legally? Yes. And the way they do it is they just say, well, upon that inspection for the claim, they noticed wear, tear, construction defect, workmanlike defects, no matter if this place has been built for 25 years. They'll name all of the non-covered reasons for the damage and then non-renew it for those reasons.
Can lawyer help file a lawsuit of denial that led to it?
No, I would sue. Yes, I would sue on the denial of the claim in the first place. Meanwhile, they would have to seek insurance elsewhere. Sure. And in Texas, they would more than likely be left to the one insurer that they could get insurance with, which would be Texas Fair Plan, which is the insurance of last resort. When nobody else will take your property because now it's known that you have damage, you can still get insurance through them.
And that's very interesting. You said now it's known that you have damage. Knowing to who? So do they have a network? Because insurance companies do talk to each other. For example, and you tell me if you know about it, because I don't. If you have a hail damage and you have a State Farm, and State Farm have paid you for the damage, but you didn't fix the roof, and then you go and file a claim with Allstate. Allstate will know that State Farm paid for the roof and you didn't do it, correct?
Yes, so they do have a database
that they share
that keeps that history.
Okay, but in case of denial, there's no evidence that there's damage. Why they become uninsured? Why Allstate would not insure State Farm, ex-State Farm client if there's no damage there?
Well, there's no covered. To them, there's no covered damage. They just blamed all of the damage for non-policy covered reasons. That's the problem, and it puts the insured in a precarious situation because they know what reality is, and if an Allstate drops them for that reason and they've got to go find insurance elsewhere, well, now you've got to fill out an application, and usually in those applications it's going to ask the question about the condition of your property. How's the roof? How old is it? Is there any damage that you know of? Well, yes. So it all ties back.
Have you helped someone like that with the denial letter? Like with the denial?
We sued on the claim, and basically that has happened a few times where I basically sent one of my letters that rips the insurance company a new one for what they've done, and what I will do to them if they drop that particular insured, which usually works. In the 2 times that I've had to do it, it's worked. Sometimes the insureds they get insurance elsewhere, and the new insurance company doesn't do their homework, and they don't perform an underwriting survey of the house, and basically we end up getting them the money they need to fix the property, and they replace the roof or whatever else is messed up.
So is it recommended route by you? Like if you get a letter from insurance that they drop in you, would you recommend to retain the attorney right away?
Oh, absolutely. Hopefully they would have gone to an attorney before that, because if the occurrence, the storm, or fire or whatever occurred early in the policy period, you won't see that non-renewal letter until, in Texas, 60 days before the end of that policy period. So there's not a lot of time even to go shop for insurance. And hopefully I would have already been on board working on the claim that got him to that place in the first place.
How can contractor help a homeowner in case of denial? Like if I'm a contractor, I come to the homeowner, damage is obvious. What can we do together?
Take pictures and document each time the insurance company goes out to perform an inspection. And if you have, bitching about it is great, and they all do. And they all have wonderful stories about what this adjuster did and what that adjuster did. But if they don't write it down, it's forgotten, or at least in the eyes of the law, it's assumed that they forgot, or their memory, no one's memory is as good as the day that it occurred as it is,
But a lot of
4
times
years later.
It's his word against, it's he said, she said. And do you recommend filming them if you see something terribly wrong or adjuster is not behaving right?
I enjoy watching the videos when that occurs. When the insurance company's adjuster's up there talking about this and that, and they're actually pointing to damage, and then he gets his chalk out, or she gets the chalk out and puts a big 0 for that slope. Like, you just identified damage, and then you're going to turn around and write a 0. It's good and it's bad. Catching them in the act is great, but it always kind of comes back to is like, okay, well, why were you filming them in the first place? You're
creating conflict.
You're creating conflict. You're assuming that they're going to purposely mess it up or intentionally omit damage. So it's kind of a fine line.
Insurance companies changing the ways they do business. What do you see, if anything, that they're sneaking into their policies? I know policies has been changing too, and what they put in writing, and it's changing throughout the nation. We see deductibles going up. We see coverage, like what's covered, what's not covered. How do you read your policy as a homeowner? I mean, it's a lot of fine print.
Well, hopefully everyone does read their policies, and that's one thing I'll mention in court with either the jury pool or the jury, that when we get our new policy, if you switch companies, you might get that deck page but and they get your money, but you don't see the actual policy for some time. I was like, and we all wait until it arrives, and you make a big deal of reading through it with your spouse or whoever will listen to you, and usually that doesn't happen. We'll see limits come up, like for the accidental discharge. Well, all of a sudden, if a policy just renews, what I've seen, the premiums go up and the coverage goes down in some way. So there might be a cap on the accidental discharge. Fortunately, especially in Texas and, well, America, there's a lot of good people, very trusting people. So when you're told something, you typically believe it until something else disproves it. So if an agent tells you, hey, we're going to renew, your premium's going to go up a little bit, that's just a percentage for cost, and nothing else changes, well, the agent might actually think that's correct too, but in reality, when the new policy for the next year comes in, coverage has changed, where I've seen insurers come in and they'll put different disclaimers for the roof, where after 15 years of known life, the insurance company will start putting a degradation of coverage for the roof, basically a payment scale. They put a table in there that says, hey, we're only going to pay the ACV of this roof with no recoverable depreciation on an RCV policy once that roof hits 15 years. And it goes down after that. It's like, okay, well, what notice did you provide the insured before you just stuck this as an attachment to that contract?
Can they even do it?
They can, and that's what the insureds need to be careful of. The old school method was to take the two different forms, put them on top of each other, and then put it up to the light and see what changes there are. But there will be a list on the declaration page of all of the endorsements to that policy. You need to look at all of them and see if any of them are new from last year. The insurance companies like to use adjectives like amendatory. Do you know what amendatory means? No one does, but it sounds good. It sounds like it's a governmental enforced, like some third party is forcing this placement of this endorsement in here. Well, that's horse crap. No, we're putting it in here because it reduces your coverage somehow.
I have to say that after I visited Chicago 6 months ago, I even made a video like why roofers in Chicago are depressed, because there's a lot of contractors are depressed because of amounts of denials. And when I came to your office, talked to your team during lunch break, this gives me hope, like reading those articles, reading new case studies on cases you win, beating State Farm. It takes years. Like what we see now took you like 2-3 years at a time. But do we have enough lawyers in the game, in the space, to help truly help contractors? Because there's so many claims, thousands and thousands. I mean, there's only so many you can help. Do we need more lawyers? Do you need more competition? Like, what will it take to level, like truly level the playing field? I like Steve Patrick and his group level the playing field, but what will it truly take to level the playing field?
Probably harsher penalties for those bad acts. In Texas, as part of the insurance code is the Prompt Pay Act, where let's say you've got a $100,000 claim, they paid nothing, jury comes back later and says, yeah, indeed, it was $100,000. Well, from the time that the insurance company should have paid it until when they actually pay it, the interest rate now is 10%. That changed in September of 2017 in Texas. It used to be 18%. But even with the 18%, I never saw that as a deterrent from them delaying the payment. And outside of first party, any of these big companies, when they get a fine that's a quarter of what they made on whatever bad act, it doesn't stray them from performing the bad act again. Obviously, for everyone, more lawyers is never the answer. More good lawyers, sure, but we have to have more punch throughs, more breaching through the wall, because more breaches in the wall, more claims get paid. Not just my cases, my clients, but everyone's. So if we do remain flies in the face of the insurance companies and we don't leave them alone and we keep pressuring them, it can only help. And I keep a positive attitude because I do get good rulings from the Texas Supreme Court. I would have been devastated if that went the other way, because what Andrew Bender and I worked on for years was there's no way in hell this is right. Which is why we took it to the top. And if we got turned down at the top, we're like, well, this could be bad. If the insurance companies were already taking advantage of it, it would only have been worse. So that's hope. Going through in the different jurisdictions in taking our clients' stories to the juries in each of them, and those juries coming back and saying, yeah, this was wrong, and they need to pay for it. We just need that to keep happening. And unfortunately for those, it does take some time, but when we get positive verdicts, it speeds all the other ones up. If we can keep doing that, well, that's the goal. That's the plan.
I know it's probably going to be controversial for our audience, but I want to talk about situations where contractors not being reasonable. I heard some opinions that it's not reasonable to ask for full replacements when you can repair, like in not matching states. Like I heard even contractors saying, well, if I'm missing 2 shingles, is it reasonable for insurance company to ask for insurance company to pay for entire replacement? What situations you see where we are not reasonable? Is there other side when we cross the line, maybe too aggressive?
Sure. Like we mentioned earlier, there's both ends of the spectrum. Now, there's obviously contractors that are out there that are just doing things that are absolutely wrong, trying to create damage to make it look like covered damage. Well, that's an absolute no-no. To your example
It's still happening?
I don't see it. Luckily, I don't see it. At least none have been referred my direction. I hear about it, but that's about it. To your example of, call it the 2 shingle, the first thing I would look at as the attorney, look at the file, look at the claim, and see if the insurance company did a brittleness test. And it's like, okay, well, if the insurance company did do a brittleness test and there's a picture of it and the roof passes that brittleness test, well, sorry, you get a patch. That would be the proper repair. Now, if for whatever reason for that particular roof, it passed the brittleness test, but the new shingles just don't match, worth a crap. And there's no way to arrange it to where it doesn't look like while you're driving by at 30 miles an hour, hey, looks like they've repaired their roof. That kind of blows for the insured. Technically, the insurance company wouldn't be on the hook for anything more than the patch job. But on a lot of those, you can make the argument that, hey, it needs to be replaced with like in kind material, and obviously when we make that repair, it doesn't look like in kind. So will you at least replace this slope to where it doesn't look like a patchwork pig?
What's happening in Florida right now? What's your take on the bill? And they're trying to prevent door knocking. Looks like they're going a little bit after contractors and lawyers. The way you read it, I mean, there's pushback. It's still a fight, but government is signing it. Like, what's your take as a lawyer on the situation? Because whatever happens in Florida most likely will spread around the country too.
The question becomes, as a roofer contractor, are they being treated any differently than anyone else who's doing sales door to door? In the old days, it was the vacuum salespeople, or the encyclopedias. That was big. None of our younger audience has any idea what I just said, but there is current law, probably in Florida as it is in Texas, that regulates door-to-door salespeople and contracts. It doesn't prohibit it, but it is a unique situation because it's not asked for by the property owner. So they can do it. However, if for whatever, call it a heated sales call. And I think the last one that went to one of my house, they were selling like washer fluid or stuff that's supposed to clean your house. But then they would give you the demonstration on the rail with like an SOS pad. It's like, okay, well. And they'll talk about how great their company is, because if you're not happy with the product, you can cancel it at any time within 48 hours or 7 days, whatever it is, and you don't even have to send it back to them. They will come back and they will pick it up. It's like, it's great that you think that that's your company's policy and procedure. However, that's Texas law. So if people end up signing something because they feel obligated, or it might be the easiest way to move the salesperson on down the road, then it's easy enough for them to cancel it if they want to. Now, if that happens with the soap salesman, the vacuum salesman, the encyclopedia salesman, and then the insurance company lobbyists in Florida say, well, these contractors and the roofers need to be treated differently, then absolutely, that's against the Constitution. They can't be treated differently. They all need to be treated the same. And should they? No, that shouldn't happen. The contractors, I think they do have a right to go sail that way. And I'd probably use one of the insurance company's arguments against them when it comes to that. It's like, hey, look, we're also providing a service to the homeowners, because they might not know that they have damage. I mean, it happens all the time. I can see why the insurance companies would want to stop that, but no, that's not right.
How do you explain then why so much push against contractors? Because you don't see it in other sectors, like in auto. When you get an accident, you don't, like, the push is not there. Like, you have the car damage, you go to Abra and it's getting fixed. How do you explain push against contractors?
Between the two sectors, there's a lot of employees at these companies, and they've got the manpower to sit around and think about how can we pull in more premiums and how can we pay out less. If we could prevent contractors and roofers from going door to door,
Bingo.
we can prevent whatever claims disbursements from that sector. And I would imagine they had some great PowerPoints, probably colorful, lots of data. Some of it was probably true. That would back up why they would want to spend the money to lobby for that. Is it wrong? Yeah, it's wrong. But at the same time, it's a company. And they were built for the sole purpose of making profit.
What would you say to the homeowner who does not want to file the lawsuit, who just says, like, State Farm is my friend and I don't want to sue them, despite the fact that it's obvious they have a damage and they have a denial?
It depends. And that is...
You must be a lawyer. It's the most lawyer answer. It depends.
Well, let's say they have a $30,000 roof and they, and a $5,000 deductible, and the insurance company came up with $2,000 in damage, and they don't want to sue. Fine. Well, then you have to be happy with what you have. You can't not sue and complain about it, because those were the cards that you were dealt. No, nothing else is going to help you. Now, I mentioned that it was public adjusters who came and asked if I could help them. I think public adjusters do a great job. They are completely outnumbered by independent adjusters. I don't even like to call them independent adjusters because there's nothing independent about them. You can almost see the strings that pull them. And they do great work. Their test is a heck of a lot harder. And they come up with their scope of damage. The problem is they don't have anything. They can point out where the insurance company didn't include obvious covered damage, but they can't enforce it. So they have to be good negotiators with whoever's on the other side, and they can show the absolute obvious, but they don't have the power to force the insurance company to actually pay it. And therein lies the problem where it comes to me. And the only way I could do it is because I have a bar card. Well, if the person doesn't want to sue, it's like, okay, well, it's the only way you're going to get paid. So either take your non-payment and be happy and keep paying your premium to State Farm, and when they say, oh, by the way, you haven't replaced all of this damage, we're going to non-renew you, don't come to me then.
Give advice to the homeowner who just realized he has a hail damage on their property and they have a State Farm insurance. What's the first step they should take?
They have to notify their carrier, for sure. That's the first thing they should do. Then I guess we could get a green screen and a nice flow chart on how it goes from there, depending on what the response is. Hopefully it's not like my client up in Dallas, where it's like, you need to bring us a bid, make sure that the estimate or the bid's even over the deductible before we go and look at it, because that's completely wrong. Allow them to come out and inspect, see how it goes. Hopefully I'm never needed. That would be great. But I stay busy, and I stay really busy, and it's because the insurance companies aren't paying these valid and obvious claims. And it's ridiculous, but unfortunately that's the current environment. So they have to put notice in, they have to let the insurance company at least try to perform whatever inspections they want to, and let them come up with a determination. And if they're not happy with the determination, get help. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a lawyer right away if there's a good valued contractor in the area, because usually it doesn't hit just one house, it hits a neighborhood. There's placards all over the place. Talk to neighbors, talk to different people in their church, whatever groups they're in, at work. And that's how you gain information. Who's happy with their contractors? Okay, great. What insurance company did you have? Did you have damage? And start comparing notes, because one of the other things that the insurance companies like to do is divide, segregate, and conquer individually versus, well, this can't possibly be right because I know at least this contractor has 10 different roofs on my street alone.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for your time, guys. If you have any questions for Chad, comment them below. Can I get a commitment from you or someone on your team to answer questions? Come back later.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
If you guys have any questions for Chad, comment below. Someone will come back later and answer them. Thank you so much for your time, sir.